Look at this French national team. Do you see something strange? Players like Mbappe and Dembele are absolute beasts on the football pitch. But here is the brutal truth. Without 1000 years of dark history of colonization, exploitation and slavery, this European football empire would not exist. Why football giants like Italy are suddenly collapsing, and why the next generation of superstars are flipping the scripts completely. Anthropologically, we all came from Africa. And just 500 years ago, Africa used to produce for the whole world. Africa was rich. Africa was producing more than 25% economy of the globe. Africa was significant. So British came there and they exploited and they colonized. Belgium did it, British did it, French did it. They all bargained and butchered on which land they want to occupy. Particularly French colonization in Algeria, millions of Africans were taken to Europe as slaves, and then for generations they lived in Europe. One can argue that not all Africans who are now living and flourishing in France or in Britain actually were the direct result of slavery, which is kind of true. I agree with you. But think about it. Why did in post-colonial period so many Africans for a better life and a better living came to Europe? The reason was Europe burned down the economy of Africa. And then when French factories needed large number of low wage jobs, which French and British, with the wealth that they exploited from Southeast Asia and Africa, were used to make France and British factories, they opened jobs. They open jobs for Africans who are willing to join these low-wage jobs, because in African nations, there's no equal opportunity for them to participate. The African dream was to escape Africa and come to France, come to Europe for a better life and better living. So the indirect effect of colonization is African dream was to leave Africa. And this is also, if you think deeply, this is how British and Americans, through their H-1B visa and F-1 visa, attracted the talents from China, from India, from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, and from Africa.
America has a secret weapon. That secret weapon is the H-1B. Without the H-1B, the scientific establishment of this country would collapse. Forget about Google. The United States is a magnet sucking up all the brains of the world. But
why? Because Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and African countries were colonized for more than 200 years. Their economy was broken. In post-colonial period, the consequence of those continents and countries, whether they were filled with corruption, it was a complete mess. That is why the African dream and the South Asian dream was to leave their own countries for a better future and a better living. So African people and South Asian people, rather than building their own countries and continents, they believed in migrating to British and Europe for a safe home and a safe living. Even though every African player who is playing now in the national team in France or in Belgium is not a direct effect of colonization, but definitely it goes without saying that it is the indirect effect of colonization for which these African players are now playing wearing the French jersey. Now, some of you will say that Africa is corrupted. That is why African players don't want to play in Africa and they want to play in Europe, because Europe is less corrupted. The systematic corruption in Europe right now is no less than Africa. But here is the truth. What made Africa so corrupted? What does the social scientists and thinkers of last 500 years say about it? Read the work of Douglas North. He clearly said that Africa is what it is, meaning the corruption of Africa is an outcome of the colonization and post-colonial destruction by the European and American institutions, so that the corruption remains in Africa. Africa remains divided and fragmented, so that in post-colonial phase, European and African corporations can keep exploiting as much as they possibly can. Or explore the work of Walter Rodney, who clearly stated that Europe did not just exploit Africa, but intentionally underdeveloped it. So this argument that, oh, Africa is corrupted because of their own internal struggle is not true. That this corruption is largely an outcome of the colonial project. But the new leaders of Africa are fighting against corruption, and they are fighting against the colonial project. That is why we see the development in Rwanda and Kenya and other parts of Africa which is coming up and shining bright. And this becomes more evident when you compare Italy and France. Think about it. The 4-time world champions Italy couldn't get a chance to play the World Cup for 3 consecutive times. And if you compare Italy and France, one of the striking point is Italy didn't open up their market, their job market for Africans just like the way French did. Italy was more conservative in getting their African players, allowing their African workers to come in. So Italy was more conservative compared to France. France was very open for African talents to come and join as factory workers or as businessmen or as football players. What is the consequence? France now has the top team in the World Cup. Yes, Italy had players like Balotelli, but that was very rare. And if you look at the New York Post article, you can clearly see that Italy didn't facilitate African players the way French did, and French got the fruit of it. But if you look at this World Cup article, you can clearly see just like Europe's economy is declining and Africa's economy is flourishing or started to flourish, you can clearly see that African teams in this World Cup is flourishing. Look at the way Senegal played. Look at how Cape Verde played. Look at how Morocco played. Look at how Congo played. You will clearly see that African teams are doing far better than they used to be in 3 World Cups back. And their economy similarly is doing good. On the other hand, if you look at the European teams, if you look at their standard of play, if you look at particularly white European game, you'll clearly see Germany lost it, Italy lost it, compared to what it used to be, the dominant European football back in 2002 or 2006 World Cup. So even with football, you can clearly see, like Europe's economy and Europe's birth rate, Europe is declining in football as well gradually. And African football, their standard of football, their standard of gameplay, be it Egypt, be it Morocco, be it Senegal, be it Congo, be it Cape Verde even, they are coming up and they are coming up very strong. Just think about it. Senegal, Congo and Ivory Coast, all of them lost the match after 85th minute of the match. They were ahead in the game against Belgium, against England, against Norway. At the same time, Cape Verde and Egypt was also very close to beating defending world champion Argentina. So Africa was extremely close to create an unpopular story of victory of Africa. Now focus closely what is the future and focus closely on Morocco versus Netherlands when Morocco beat Netherlands. Focus on the 3 players of Morocco, Luce, Soufiane and Salahuddin. All of them are actually Dutch players. They remained in Dutch for a significant part of their life and they played in the Dutch football, Dutch club for long periods of time. But they wore the Moroccan jersey, not the Dutch jersey. And the Netherlands and the Dutch were not at all happy that 3 of their peak club players actually choose an African team rather than European team. They choose African team where their forefathers lived and they rejected the European team, Dutch football. And they actually won the match against Dutch. Moroccan Federation created a football culture that is somewhat better than Dutch Football Federation, which indicates a shift, which means the future players of Mbappe, the future players who are living now in Europe, but their forefathers and ancestors lived in Africa are starting to switch back and they are more comfortable to wear the African countries, their ancestors' jersey rather than the European jersey. So as we go along, as more African teams come up, rise up, roar louder than the European teams, we will see a shift because the birth rate in Africa is rising. The economy and GDP is rising fast. And economy in Europe and birth rate in Europe is declining. Once in a lifetime shift that we are watching, not only in economy and in birth rate, not only in global geopolitics and in influence, but we are also seeing how colonization affected football, how post-colonization forced African dream to be in Europe and America, and now that same African dream is coming back home to Africa. The question that should come in everyone's mind: why don't Africans and Southeast Asians start believing in their own country the way China did? China between 1970 to 2015, all were dreaming of studying in Ivy League University. But now they're coming back. They're coming back home. Now Chinese universities are ranking tremendously well. They're doing well in research, in AI, in every way possible. In many disciplines, they are doing better than British and American average universities. It was unthinkable. Just think about it. In last 5 years, more than 30 top American and British professors started working in China with Chinese universities. If you say to an academician in Europe that a Nobel laureate from USA will start working in a Chinese university, they would laugh at you. They would say that you're mad. And that is exactly what has happened in 2026. A Nobel laureate in chemistry started working in a Chinese university. An American Nobel laureate who got Nobel Prize in chemistry, an American professor, American scientist, is now working in a Chinese university. So things are shifting. Then why can't African Americans, Southeast Asian, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis and Indians who have studied in Ivy League University, who have got the passport, who have gained the expertise and the perspectives, it's time probably for them as well to rethink why are they contributing to a foreign country's economy when it's better to build your own ancestors' country and identity. It's only time that when Africa's economy, Southeast Asia's economy starts to rise, more and more talented, experienced, high-skilled professionals will start coming back. If today, look at the European countries' position when it comes to migration. When America and Europe's economy started to decline, people like Elon Musk, the multi-billionaires and trillionaires, started blaming innocent immigrants when they are not willing to give the due tax that they should. So billionaires will skip paying tax and blame immigrants for the decline of the economy. Whatever horrible things happen in Europe and America, they'll blame the immigrants. But they'll make a fortune for themselves by rigging the stock market, doing whatever they need to do in Wall Street. They'll park their yacht in Turkey or in Dubai and they'll make billions, but they'll blame whatever problem there is, they'll blame the immigrants. They love the African people when African people wear French jersey or England's jersey and win the World Cup for them. But they hate Africans. They say that they're immigrants. These immigrants are, creating noise and making the city polluted and you name it. They love exploiting resources, but they don't want to rub shoulders. They don't want equal rights. So they love Africans and Indians when they are contributing for their country. But whenever something bad happens, they are the first people to blame the immigrants. So it's time for a realization. And that realization is part of the psychological decolonization. Then, like China, the way the talented people of China came back and is building China, why can't the Africans and Indians and Pakistanis and Bangladeshis start returning home and building their country for a better future and a stronger identity?